Hey guys, it's me, your autoimmune friend, and I'm here to tell you what you need to know if you have been recently diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, so you don't have to get 8 years behind the curve like I did and end up with a gaping hole in the middle of your head. Alright, so let's get into it. So if you are new here, I have an autoimmune disease because why else would I have this giant hole in the middle of my head? And my autoimmune disease is called lichen planopilaris. Essentially, there's an unknown antigen in my scalp that my body attacks, and that causes chronic inflammation, which then leads to hair loss because the inflammation is sapping my hair follicles, causing scarring, and according to doctors, the hair will never grow back. But I have seen some reversal of this, so don't count me out just yet, all right? First up, it is okay to shop around when it comes to physicians. When I first got diagnosed, I was 19. This started when I was 13 years old, by the way. So there was a big gap between experiencing symptoms and getting diagnosed. When I first got diagnosed, before I got the legitimate diagnosis, I was told like, oh, it looks like you have lupus, you have psoriasis, and then they sent me on my way, okay? Second opinions matter. Then I went to another physician. They said like, oh, it's like lichen planopilaris, but we're going to do a biopsy to be sure. And that was someone out of town, so I was traveling back and forth. However, when I say shop around, I have been to a number of dermatologists, and I've moved if I didn't feel comfortable, if I felt like they weren't seeing me as a person. Like, yes, there are tons of patients that you have to see, but it cannot be that hard to look at a patient's chart before you see them, to at least remember what you discussed last time, because why are we saying the same thing in every single visit? Let me know. Make it make sense, because it doesn't. So I definitely encourage shopping around until you are comfortable. This physician, it's hard to be open with doctors in general because it's like really truly you're talking to a stranger and you're telling them things like about your body and about what you're experiencing. But shopping around, you should be finding someone that is comfortable, someone that you feel that it is okay to be open with, to share new symptoms, old symptoms, what may be causing a trigger, someone who would also listen and validate you as well. I recall mentioning to doctors before, like, oh yeah, like I started like working out and that's helped with inflammation, or I noticed like when I did an anti-inflammatory diet, like that helped, and they're like, oh yeah, like those things help, but they're not going to really do anything in the long run. It wasn't until I started experiencing out of the blue highs where like I had no choice but to eat anti-inflammatory, like cut out a lot of things, and I saw like reversal of my symptoms and effects, and I was like, they said that this wouldn't be helpful, but I'm literally seeing it help me. Like, what? And then I saw a doctor who like validated, like, yeah, like you need to be able to manage your stress, you need to eat healthy, you need to move your body, like those things are going to help, especially when you combine that in your treatments. Some people only do holistic methods. I try to mix of holistic and medical treatments together because that's worked for me. But yes, shop around, make sure you're comfortable, see someone who will see, hear, and validate your experiences. I would also say medication. So another thing to understand is medication. Medication can be very scary. I don't know about you guys, but when I see those commercials about medications and they're listing all of the side effects, I'm like, now who in their right mind would take this? Like, why would you be taking these things? And I remember saying that to a doctor, I'm like, oh yeah, I saw a commercial for that, and they listed all the time. I was like, not for me. And she actually broke down to me that like in their trials, if someone experiences one of those side effects, then they have to list it. And maybe she was just telling me that. It was a doctor that I trusted, so I did take her word for it. Usually I'm like, no. But I think that it's important to know that, for one, not every treatment works for everyone in the same way. There are some treatments that I've taken that others are like, oh, like I've seen great results within 3 months. And for me, that wasn't the case. Like I ended up seeing irritation on my scalp. I've seen adverse effects. And I'm like, okay, well, good for you. Didn't work for me. I've also taken medications. There's one, I've taken Plaquenil twice. So I took it in 2020 and I started losing, and people are like, oh, you have COVID. I'm like, no, like it's literally tied to this medication, because when I stopped the medication, it came back, but I couldn't taste sweet things. And to know me is to know I love sweets, part of my problem with inflammation, but I couldn't taste sweets, and it was something else I couldn't taste. But when I stopped taking the medication, I could taste those things. Like I like did off and on for a while just to be sure. Stop taking it. Fast forward, I think it was like 3 years later, 4 years later maybe, because it was last year I think. Started taking it again, I can taste sweets. And let me tell you something, I kind of wish that I wouldn't be able to, because I need to cut back. But I don't have those same side effects anymore. So when it comes to medication, I definitely say do your own research. I was against taking oral meds for a while because, for one, I'm terrible at them. Two, I didn't want to like put the stuff in my body. I would prefer topical medications. But once I started doing oral meds that were like systematic, it definitely helped me see results. So I definitely think that doing your own research, talking to the doctor, bringing questions to them. Again, if you're seeing someone that you trust, they shouldn't be pushing you towards the medication, but should be hearing you and giving you sound medical advice. So that's another thing as well. What else do I have here? Natural remedies, okay? Let me tell you something. I already mentioned that, of course, they told me like, oh, working out, eating healthy won't help you. Please lean in. lean in very close. It helps, okay? When you are first diagnosed, when you're first diagnosed and you start making these changes, it is going to be so helpful for you. For one, you're able to get ahead of things. For me, I was 8 years behind the curve. Like, it was no, oh, I can get ahead. No. If you are someone who's diagnosed early on, take advantage of medication. If you can, take advantage of lifestyle changes as well. When you're able to monitor or manage the stress in your body, feed and fuel your body with healthy things, that is so important. One of the key factors for a lot of autoimmune disease is inflammation. Inflammation is tied to stress, highly processed food, highly processed sugars, and some other things as well. But when you get those three things under control, at least in my experience, it can make a whole 180, 360 turnaround for you. So keep that in mind if you are newly diagnosed. Another thing, maybe the last thing I would say is, you may not be able to show up the way that you used to show up. And what does that mean? Are you a new person? Can you do less? Can you do more? I can't tell you that. You have to listen to your body and be able to discern that for yourself. And listening to your body is hard. It is something you have to train yourself to slow down and do. Years ago, if you would have told me like, oh, how do you feel? I'm like, I don't know. I ignore it. I ignore the inflammation. I ignore what's happening on my scalp. I don't know. Now, if I put something on my head, like I know like, okay, I did this and this was causing this. Or if I wake up feeling lethargic or like extremely fatigued, I immediately know to check my scalp and see what the inflammation is looking like. Or backtrack to see what I've done that could possibly trigger inflammation, or even looking at like what my log says that I've experienced over the past few weeks, because sometimes it takes some time for those things to build up. But listening to your body is going to be so important, and it is going to help you in the long run. If your body says rest, rest. Don't try to do everything, because you may induce a flare. Another thing is, when I say that you may need to show up differently or things may change, you will need a support system. Not everyone has a support system, and I get it, I understand it. I have been blessed to have an amazing support system, but one thing that I have seen through sharing my story, or using like my platform and engaging with other people, everyone has something. And it is insane the way that you will find people that are experiencing something similar, if not the same thing as you. So there are communities out there for you. If it's not here, then there may be somewhere else out there. If maybe it's not your family, maybe there's a support group, or maybe there's even counselors that like specialize with people that have autoimmune diseases. So I think that that's very important, but understanding that you have to give yourself grace. And that is something I am still learning, even with all that I've experienced over the past few years and like paying attention to my health and really leaning in. I have been struggling/learning to give myself grace, not using grace as an excuse, because sometimes I have a tendency to do that, but really truly using and giving myself grace, because what I want to do, what I see other people doing, I don't get to do all the time. Like I will eat what I want sometimes, but despite my rash decisions, I can always like binge on something, or I definitely don't really drink, things of that nature, because I know this aligns to induce flares. Some people like to feed into things that cause them stress. Me, no, if I know I need to decompress, I'm decompressing, okay? I know that I need to stick to my routine, my schedules, everything, because I have to manage my stress in a way that's different than for other people. So I think that's all. I might have to do a part 2 for like, okay, you're newly diagnosed, but now like you're in it and you're experiencing, like how do you cope with it? But I think for sure, making sure you find a doctor or physician that you trust, understanding medication. Medication doesn't have to be a bad thing. Medication doesn't have to be the only thing. There are some things that you can do as far as lifestyle changes that can work in tandem with your medication. And then understanding and knowing that you may change, whether that's in the way that you listen to your body, show up for yourself, the way you show up in your community shows up for you, all the things. So if you have been recently diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, I hope that this helps you, because let me tell you something. It took me far too long to learn this, and I had to learn on my own. So I'm telling you guys what I have to learn on my own, so you don't have to suffer the way that I did. You're welcome. But that's all I got for today. Next time, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but meet me there, join me there, however you get there, be there so we can chat some more. Bye.